We are joined today at the ADRBC 2018 Symposium by Patricia Lane. Patricia is a chartered mediator, chartered arbitrator, family mediator. She basically does it all.
And parent coordinator too.
And a parent coordinator. So we're really, really excited to have a few moments to chat with her. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you so much for inviting me. That's really, really nice for me.
So one of the things that we really wanted to chat with you a little bit about goes a bit beyond some of the scope. We've heard from government a little bit here at the symposium already, and one of the things that I know for you is that you have all the sort of traditional training in mediation and the concept of neutrality and all that sort of thing. But then I also know that and have seen that you're active politically.
Right.
And Amanda and I, going to a number of other conferences, we've seen that there's a big discussion on the interaction and what the role of conflict resolution practitioners is in the political sphere. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts that you might want to share with us on that.
Well, politics is just the conversation that happens in our society about how decisions get made and where power is allocated. And that's a lot about what a mediation is. And my tagline on my business says private mediation, public conversations, or something like that. So I've never seen a difference. And of course, the Public Conversations Project out of Boston was one of the first to kind of institutionalize the reality that we're never going to cross, for example, the abortion debate unless we talk to each other, right? Mm-hmm. So encouraging people in the public sphere to have these big conversations where you might not be striving for agreement. You might be striving for understanding. And that's how the conflict was resolved in Northern Ireland. They didn't go looking for agreements. They went looking for understanding. And in mediation, one of the things we teach mediators is you're not to go for an agreement. That's not the right goal. The goal is to build understanding, right? So I don't see a big difference. Politics is pretty polarized in North America particularly. I believe that that's a problem. That's because we don't take into account the views of, 1 million people just voted for the Liberal Party in Ontario and there's no seats or 1 seat or something, right? So those people are voiceless now for the next 4 years. And that's not a good thing in a society that values diversity and democracy. And so I think that it's incumbent on people who understand the importance of public conversations to get involved in conversations like what kind of voting system should we have, for example. Proportional representation it's almost certain will require coalitions. Well, that's all about listening to the other side and developing a shared understanding and seeing if, maybe there's a third way we could move forward, a creative solution. And the agreement that we have between the NDP and the Greens is a really good example of that. And so to me, there's no difference at all. We'll just have a better society if we learn how to talk to each other rather than, I've got 40% of the vote, so I've got 100% of the power. That makes no sense to me at all. That's not how you build a cohesive, inclusive society that values the kinds of things that I think mediators value.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking to mediators who are really interested in making a difference in the political discourse, where do you think they start?
Well, with their issue, right? So I don't know what their issue would be. Why are they interested in making a difference? If they're interested in making a difference simply to have a more peaceable society, I think you start with electoral reform and engaging people in, what is this politics thing? Like, what is an MLA? What do they do? Most people don't know what an MLA does. Basically, they move from difficult conversation to difficult conversation to difficult conversation all day long. So they have to be excellent negotiators. It's one of the reasons that I'm admirer of David Eby, although to be fair, other attorneys general before him have also had that talent of being able to really listen and then see whether there's a way to meet their needs while also meeting the needs of the institution that you're representing.
Yeah. I really appreciate, the point that you're making about, what our role is when we come into a conflict and try to work with people to help increase that sort of understanding. And then actually expanding that role out into the public sphere around. So we're not really just private mediators or arbitrator or like working within that sort of in a really limited scope. You're really calling on us to view things with a larger lens and get involved.
Well, for example, I don't think it's any answer to say, well, we should make mediation mandatory, because it's not affordable. That's not going to increase access to justice. I actually believe in mandatory mediation, but the rates that people charge mean that they can't afford to go to court, and they also can't afford mediation. And yes, it's true that mediation and even parent coordination is almost always cheaper than the alternative. But who's got, you know, $10,000 to throw at a problem like that? Like, I often say, I couldn't afford me.
Yeah.
And
more
so
affordable doesn't necessarily mean affordable.
No, that's right. And so, you know, that's what, in my view, that's what the Family Law Act did, was it offloaded a bunch of costs to ordinary people who couldn't afford it before, and they can't afford it now, which is why there's still only 27, I think that's the right number, better check that, parent coordinators in the province. And there's only 100 people across the country who are both CMEDs and CARBs. Like, that, we've been around since 20 years. What is that about? It's not about not wanting the credentials. It's about people knowing that, yeah, they, you know, 80% of people prefer to use mediation. They want to talk to each other. They don't want a judge to decide necessarily. But they can't afford it, and yet we say, oh, well, we'll give you more mediators so it'll be more affordable. It doesn't work. I think we have a responsibility to call out when we see those kinds of injustices, and so that means if you're going to be effective at that, that means getting politically involved.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely take the point that there is a question about neutrality sort of locked into that if we're there facilitating that kind of conversation, and also the, as you say, like the importance in actually looking at a power balanced process.
Yeah, I mean, I always wondered about neutrality. It's you know, I tell my family files, you know, I actually got very, very strong, very well-informed opinions about what's good for your children and what's bad for them. And I'm not going to preside over an agreement that I think is going to hurt your children's brains. I'm not going to do that. So from that perspective, I'm neither neutral nor impartial.
Yeah.
And
I think our preferred term ended up being multi-partial.
Multi-partial, right. So, but I think mediators have values. I think, you know, we don't preside over processes where there's clear abuse going on. Why would we do that? So it's not really about not having opinions. It's about trying to figure out how we can use our skills. And, you know, mediation is a really assisted negotiation, and mediators have to be excellent negotiators. Well, what do we know about negotiation? We know that you build a golden bridge, that you understand where the other person's coming from so you can meet their interests, right? That's just what being effective politically is too.
Right. Well, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us
for
Thank you.
a brief little chat here at the symposium.
Yeah. You know, I've been a mediator for almost 40 years now, and nobody's ever asked me that question before, so thank you.
Oh, interesting. Great. Well, thank you very much for being willing to engage with us on it.